you've used a couple of words there that people try to manipulate history after the time of the Prophet's death. In your book, you highlight an incident when Fatima Zahra alayhi salam goes to speak to people to garner support for her husband's rights. And people say to her that, oh, Ali came too late. And I think the response was, well, should I have left the Prophet's body and come to chase something worldly?
Yeah.
Why do you think that? I mean, I think it's obvious, but I'd like to hear your view as to why do you think this process took place of Saqifa while the Prophet's body was being prepared? One, and two, why did a handful of people take this view? Well, it's too late. You know, Ali wasn't there, and we've moved on with the change of God.
So, from a historical point of view, we know that at the time of the Prophet's death, there was already a little bit of tension, hostility in the community between these two groups, the Ansar, who were the kind of latecomers, if you like, to Islam, and then the earlier Meccan group, the Muhajirun, who kind of thought of themselves as the original. And these two groups, it seems to me, had some distrust of the other. One group felt the other was marginalizing them, and both groups felt that the biggest danger would be to have the next leader being from the other group, because then they would certainly be pushed out. So the Saqifa event, I mean, the Saqifa was just one of 2 or 3 meetings happening at that moment of these different groups. And then they discovered about the other meeting and they all came together, omitting the most important people of all, and that is the son-in-law of the Prophet and his own daughter, who were the only ones omitted from all of this meeting. So quite obviously, I can understand why a group who didn't favor Ali, because they didn't favor any of the original Meccan group, I could understand why they would be against Ali and advocate someone else. It's hard to understand why the group in which Ali should be receiving support did not support him and instead chose somebody else. So, there was a power vacuum. I think my reading suggests that people were shocked by the death of the Prophet. They really were shocked that he had died. And I think people were numbed by that, left without him to guide them. So I would imagine that it would have been a confusing and a difficult time, and I think that confusion may be the cause why people said to Lady Fatima, well, if only Ali had come later, but we've settled the issue now, let's move on. But even the historians the Sunni historians record that Abu Bakr afterwards admitted they'd made a mistake. Maybe we have made an error in judgment here. Even the Sunni sources admit this. So it is a very difficult period of history because you always end up taking sides, and I really tried to find a middle path, but it's very difficult to find a middle path. Again, remove all the names and present it as an historical moment, and most people would make a different choice than the choice they would make as soon as you mention names.
Do you believe, checking from the topics we're covering, do you believe or have you researched the view on the appointment of Ali to be the successor after the Prophet? It's an off-the-cuff question, I guess I'm asking.
Yes, I mean the Ghadir Khum event quite thoroughly, and if you look at the Ghadir Khum event, the characteristics of it, the fact that the Prophet waited till everybody had arrived. He didn't begin that khutbah, that famous sermon in which he speaks of Ali as the Mawla. He waits for everybody to arrive so that the greatest possible number of people can hear this declaration. And the declaration seems to be quite clear. Even the Sunni texts record the declaration of whoever I am the Mawla, Ali is the Mawla. Even the Sunni texts record this. Of course, it all hangs on how you translate the word Mawla. That is the great difficulty. But the Sunni texts do not deny that the Prophet made the statement, putting his hand on the shoulder of Ali or holding up Ali's hand, whichever the gesture was. It was clearly heard and witnessed by people and was recorded by all the most important books of Sunni hadith. And Well, I can't remember now because I'm getting old, but I know there's also a grammatical detail in Arabic about the word mawla, because of course mawla loses the definite article, because when it is used by the Prophet in that sermon, whoever was my mawla is his mawla. It loses the definite article in Arabic, but it really has the definite article, and al mawla has a very specific meaning. I can't remember the grammatical details, but it is one of the points in favor of mawla, not just meaning, associate or supporter, but meaning something absolutely definite in terms of leadership.
Okay. Thank you for that, Sheikh. Would you like to word, Mawla? Please.
Actually, I wanted to add, according to what you just said, Father. First point about when we spoke about Fadak, when we called it only in heritage for her. And then there is a reference of a narration that I read. I actually found one narration in the Sunni books. We had like about more than one, of course, in our books. When Jibreel came to the Prophet with the verse, وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَى حَقَّهُ, and give your relatives the right. And then he called upon Fatima. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered me and ahabaha to give her fadak. So fadak was a gift for her from the Prophet before his death. And then it stayed with her for 3 years and a bit. And with her workers working there and bringing the Prophet every year or every month, or that interval of time that was needed to gather the Prophet. Secondly, about when they gathered in the Saqifa, they were in a safe zone after the Prophet ﷺ appointed Imam Ali alayhi salam. That was the reason of the panicking, that they panicked. They wanted people from them. The Ansar wanted a person from them, and the Muhajirin wanted a person from them, because the idea was brought up by I don't know if I can say the name, or by Umar and Abu Bakr. By Umar exactly, he brought up the idea of pledging allegiance to one of them, and then they panicked because they were feeling safe that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed someone. And then the third point about Mawla, إنما وليكم الله ورسوله, in this verse, إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا, when the wilayah of Allah, which is the Sultan, which is the power that he has over his creation, with using the harf al-wa, which is al-atf, إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا, describing Imam Ali alayhi salam by characteristics, which is sometimes when you describe someone by characteristics is more subtle than describing him by name. When you point at someone by name, a lot of people share the same name, but not a lot of people, they share the same event of giving the ring. So the wilayah of Allah, when it's in the same as the wilayah of the Prophet and the same as the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, here the meaning of Mawla. Mawla becomes more specific and different to what they go for. And apart from that, let's say even the Mawla is the meaning, it doesn't mean that he has to be the caliph or the successor of the Prophet. There is no one that had the same event as Imam Ali alayhi salam, or Ghadir Khum, or showing the people this kind of level. No one was spoke about. The Prophet didn't say the same thing about anyone other than Amir al-Mu'mineen. So if you want to talk about, let's say Imam Ali is not an Imam, he's not the successor, but if the people really wanted someone to guide them, or he would be the someone that was chosen to be the trustworthy person, being called upon in front of 70,000 people or 120,000 people according to different narration, and to say, Man kuntu mawlah fa'aliyum mawlah, Allahumma wali man walah wa adi man. So
if I could add just one more point to that, which is of some interest to me, and that is that they are the opponents of Ghadir Khum. In other words, those scholars who say, well, the Prophet didn't leave any specific instructions about who should follow him. Generally, they say that he left a process, or he left a procedure, or he left a mechanism. Now, I always say, well, what was this mechanism? Where do you find this? Because the truth is, and you yourself have just said it, that Abu Bakr was chosen by acclamation. Basically, Umar stood up and said, I think it should be him, and I expect everyone to agree, and everyone just gave the allegiance. that wasn't laid down by the Prophet. I don't know of any text where the Prophet said that's how it should be done. So already you're on shaky ground if you say that the Prophet didn't appoint a leader. He left some sort of vague procedure by which I can find no reference to this procedure that he left, but I can find in the Sunni and the Shia books Ghadir Khum, and that seems to be absolute clarity.
Now we the